My name is Clara Vance, and one dinner, just after I turned 25, was the moment my old life ended and my real one began. It was my parents' 35th wedding anniversary, and our family had assembled around the formal dining table in our Columbus, Ohio home. The sound of silverware against china filled the room as my mother, Eleanor, lifted her champagne flute. A cold, practiced smile was fixed on her face, a smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Some children make you a credit to your community," she announced, her voice as sharp and brittle as spun sugar. "Others just take up space." An immediate hush fell over the table. Every single person turned to look at me, expecting me to flinch and look away, just like I always had. But I didn't. I simply leaned back in my chair, holding her gaze without a single tremor. "Even taking up space has a cost, Mom," I said, my voice quiet but lined with a strength she'd never heard before. Her smile faltered for just a second. She recovered with a forced, airy laugh. "And what cost is that, Clara?" she asked, her voice dripping with the condescension she was famous for. I let the silence hang in the air, letting the tension build until it was almost a physical thing. Then, I let a small smirk play on my lips. "A mortgage, 1,000 miles away," I said, pausing to let the words land. "That's where I live now." The entire table went still. My sister's fork made a loud clatter as it dropped onto her plate. My father, Henry, suddenly found the pattern of his dinner plate intensely fascinating, unable to look at me. My mother's face was a mask of confusion, caught between utter shock and a flicker of what might have been regret. I didn't stick around for the fallout. I stood, leaving my napkin on the table, and walked away, letting the suffocating silence swallow my final words. That was the night I finally understood that some family tables are not worth a seat, and I was done trying to earn mine. Have you ever been made to feel like a ghost by the very people who were supposed to see you the most? Tell me your story in the comments. Where did you finally find your sense of belonging? Stick around, because this is just the start of how I built my own. Growing up in Columbus, our house always felt like a stage set for someone else's life. My older sister, Sophie, was the star of the show, the golden child my mother had poured all her ambitions into. Sophie's path was already paved and polished, leading straight to a prestigious law firm filled with courtroom victories and corner offices. I was the afterthought. I was the girl who spent her days and nights hunched over a sewing machine in her bedroom, stitching together scraps of fabric into dreams that my mother openly called pointless little hobbies. My passion for fashion design wasn't just overlooked, it was actively belittled, treated as a frivolous waste of time that was getting in the way of a real future. I think I was around 11 when the difference became painfully clear. Sophie was 3 years older and she'd come home with awards from her debate team, and my mother's face would just light up with this warm, genuine pride. "You're going to do great things," she'd say, placing a proprietary hand on Sophie's shoulder. Meanwhile, I'd be sitting right there at the dinner table, clutching a sketchbook filled with my latest designs, just waiting for my moment. But that moment never came. My father, a man of few words, would always nod along to Sophie's achievements, but would barely offer a glance in my direction. I learned very early on to keep my dreams quiet, to fold them up and tuck them away like the fabric swatches I hid under my bed. By the time I was in high school, sewing had become my entire world. It was my sanctuary. My bedroom was constantly filled with the gentle hum of my old secondhand sewing machine as I took clothes from thrift stores and transformed them into something original, something mine. My best friend Jenna was the only person on the planet who got it. She would sit on my bedroom floor for hours, flipping through my sketchbooks. "Clara, you're going to be a huge deal someday," she'd say. I know it. Her belief in me was a tiny flame of hope in a house that felt more like a monument to my sister's success. There's one memory that still feels like a fresh wound. I was 16 when I entered a regional textile arts contest. I poured weeks of my life into creating a dress from intricately woven recycled materials. I won first place. My name was actually printed in the local paper. I ran home that day, clutching the award certificate, my heart just hammering with pride. I thought, just maybe, this time would be different. This time they'd have to see me. I found my mother in the kitchen and showed her the certificate, expecting, I don't know, a smile, a hug, anything. Instead, she just glanced at it, handed it back, and said in a flat voice, "That's nice, dear, but let's not get distracted by these little projects." And then she immediately turned away and started talking about Sophie's amazing scores on her pre-law entrance exams. That very night, my mother threw a huge dinner party to celebrate Sophie's acceptance into a summer program at an Ivy League school. There were streamers, a fancy cake, and neighbors filling up our living room. I just stood in a corner, the certificate crumpled in my fist, feeling more invisible than ever. My father didn't say a word. He never did. He just sat in his favorite armchair with the newspaper, allowing my mother's voice and my sister's praise to dominate the entire house. I wanted to scream at him, to force him to look at me just once, but I didn't. I just went back to my room, sat at my sewing machine, stitched another seam, and made a silent promise to myself that one day I would prove all of them wrong. Jenna came over the next day, and she didn't even have to ask what was wrong. She just looked at me with this quiet, knowing sadness. "They just don't get it," she said, handing me a brand new professional-grade sketchbook. "But you're going to make them." School wasn't much of a refuge. Teachers would go on and on about Sophie's sharp mind, her incredible ability to argue any point. I was just the quiet girl in the back of the class, the one who would rather be drawing in her notebook than speaking up. But I kept entering contests, and every small win felt like a tiny act of rebellion. Of course, my mother never came to any of the award ceremonies. She always had an excuse. She was too busy, or Sophie had a mock trial that day. My father might mumble a good job if I brought it up, but his eyes would never leave the television screen. After a while, I just stopped trying to get them to notice. By my senior year, I had saved up enough money from babysitting to start buying better quality fabric, slowly building a portfolio that I hoped would be my ticket out of there. I'd stay up half the night, sewing under the dim light of my desk lamp, picturing a future where my designs were on a runway, where my work actually mattered. Jenna would sneak over with coffee and keep me company, her encouragement a constant lifeline. "You're different, Clara," she'd always say, "and that's what makes you powerful." I held on to her words like a shield, using them to block out the sound of my mother's voice that was always echoing in my head, the one that kept telling me I would never be good enough. Looking back, those years forged me. Every dismissive comment, every ignored achievement, every single moment I was pushed to the side to make more room for Sophie's spotlight, it all built a fire inside of me. I had no idea where that fire would take me, but I knew with absolute certainty that I couldn't spend one more second in a house that refused to see me. My sewing machine wasn't just for making clothes, it was my escape plan, and every single stitch was a step closer to freedom. The acceptance letter arrived on a dreary, rainy afternoon, hidden inside a plain business envelope. I was 18, standing in the kitchen of my childhood home, and I remember my fingers were trembling as I tore it open. The words seemed to jump off the page. I had been accepted into one of the top design schools in Chicago, and they were offering me a significant scholarship. For the very first time in my life, I could see a clear path forward, a future that was entirely my own. My heart was pounding with a wild mix of excitement and absolute terror, because I knew that showing that letter to my mother was going to start a war. That night at dinner, I slid the envelope across the table toward her. Her eyes scanned the page, and her lips pressed together into a thin, hard line. "Design school," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Clara, you need to get a real career, like your sister. The law is a stable, respectable profession. This is a pipe dream." I balled my hands into fists under the table, my nails digging into my palms. "It's not a pipe dream, Mom," I said, my voice quiet but steady. "It's what I'm going to do." She let out a cold, sharp laugh that seemed to suck all the air out of the room. "You will live to regret wasting your life on this nonsense." My father, sitting at the head of the table, kept his eyes glued to his plate. He said nothing. His silence, as it always did, said everything. I turned to my sister, holding on to a sliver of hope that she, at least, might understand. Sophie just leaned back in her chair, a look of detached judgment on her face. "Are you really throwing away your potential like this?" she asked, her tone flat, as if she were cross-examining a hostile witness. The support I had hoped for wasn't there. Even she couldn't see me. I snatched the letter back and left the table, my pulse thundering in my ears. With every step I took toward my room, my resolve hardened. I would not stay in a house that refused to believe in me. Packing didn't take long. I folded my clothes, my portfolio of sketches, and my old beat-up sewing machine into one large suitcase. That machine had been with me through every late night, every secret dream I had stitched into reality since I was a teenager. As I was zipping up the suitcase, my mother appeared in the doorway of my room. "If you walk out that door," she said, her voice icy and calm, "don't you dare expect us to bail you out when this whole fantasy implodes." I looked her straight in the eye. "I won't need you to," I said, and brushed past her without another word. My heart was racing, but my steps were firm and didn't falter. Chicago hit me like a tidal wave. It was loud, chaotic, and relentlessly fast, nothing like the quiet, suburban stillness of Columbus. My savings disappeared almost overnight on rent for a tiny room in a shared apartment. Even buying groceries felt like a major financial decision. The scholarship covered a large part of my tuition, but it didn't cover living expenses. Within a week, I found a grueling part-time job in a garment district workshop, sorting and cutting massive bolts of fabric for designers who never even bothered to learn my name. The hours were brutal. The pay was barely enough to cover my share of the rent for our apartment with its creaky floors and paper-thin walls. But every night, I would pull out my sewing machine, set it up on our wobbly kitchen table, and get to work. Every single stitch felt like an act of defiance, like proof that I was meant to be here. Then, the phone calls from home started. My mother's voice would crackle through the receiver, sharp and demanding as ever. "Clara, it's your duty to help support this family," she'd say. "Just a couple $100 a month. You owe us that much, at least." I would stand there, frozen, the phone feeling hot against my ear. "Mom, I can barely afford to eat," I'd try to explain. "You're in a big city like Chicago," she'd snap back. "Figure it out." My father never called. Sophie would occasionally send a brief text asking about my grades, but she never once asked how I was doing. The weight of their expectations felt heavier than the constant noise of the city. I eventually started sending them what I could, $75 one month, maybe $100 the next, because the guilt they piled on was harder to bear than the hunger. Every check I put in the mail meant cutting back on fabric for my projects or skipping more meals, but I kept telling myself it was just temporary. I was proving them wrong. I was showing them I could make it on my own. Still, every time I had to write their address on an envelope, I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. The workshop was both my prison and my classroom. I learned the feel of every kind of textile, the precise rhythm of the cutting shears, the names of designers who would walk past me without a second glance. Sometimes I'd overhear them talking about their latest runway shows or features in fashion magazines, and I would close my eyes and imagine my name on those pages instead. My professors told me my work had a unique edge, but between my classes and my shifts at the workshop, I was barely sleeping. Chicago took everything from me and gave back very little in return. Jenna called regularly, and her voice was a small, comforting piece of home. "You're doing it, Clara. You're really doing it," she'd say. And for a few minutes, I would almost believe her. I told her all about the scholarship, the grueling job, the constant exhaustion. She was a great listener, her laughter always soft and grounding. But I never told her about the money I was sending home. That was a secret I kept locked away, a heavy stone in my chest. I didn't want her pity. I wanted to feel proud. Winter in Chicago was brutal. My hands were cracked and sore from the long hours at the workshop, and the ancient radiator in my apartment would rattle and clang like it was on its last legs. Some nights, I'd lie awake just listening to the hum of my sewing machine, the only sound that made me feel like I was still fighting for something. Every new design I pinned to my wall was a small victory, a little reminder that I hadn't come all this way for nothing. But doubt was a constant companion. On nights when I was so tired that the lines of my sketches started to blur, I'd wonder if my mother had been right. Maybe I was just chasing an illusion, trying to spin thread and fabric into a sense of self-worth. But the thought of going back, of walking into that house in Columbus and hearing her say the words "I told you so," was more terrifying than any hardship Chicago could throw at me. So I kept sewing. I kept fighting. By the spring, I had completed my first full collection for a major class project. My professor called it raw and fearless. I took that as the highest possible compliment. For the first time, I could see what my future might actually look like, and it was something built entirely with my own two hands. The city still intimidated me, but I was learning to move with its rhythm instead of fighting against it. The calls from home, however, never stopped. My mother's demands became more frequent, her tone coated in a thin layer of sweetness, but with a sharp edge underneath. "You should be grateful for everything we did for you, Clara," she'd say. "You owe us." I'd often hang up, my chest tight with a confusing mix of guilt and rage. I was chasing my dream, but I was still chained to the life I had so desperately tried to escape. I had no idea then just how much worse it was about to get, or how the one person I trusted most in the world was about to test me in a way I never saw coming. But back then, in that tiny apartment with the city lights filtering through the blinds, I felt like I was on the verge of something great. My sewing machine hummed on steady and defiant, and every stitch whispered the same promise. I was never, ever going back. Chicago wasn't the dream I had pictured. It was a relentless grind. By 20, I was juggling a full course load at design school with my job at the workshop, my days a dizzying blur of lectures, sketching, and late-night shifts, cutting fabric. My cramped apartment, which I shared with 2 other students, had barely enough room for my sewing machine, but I made it work. I'd be up long past midnight stitching together samples under a single flickering desk lamp, my hands aching but my mind buzzing with ideas. Every single design was a small act of defiance against my mother's claim that I was just a pointless dreamer. The pressure was constant and suffocating. The scholarship helped with tuition, but rent, groceries, and materials for my projects devoured every dollar I earned. My diet consisted of instant noodles and cheap coffee as I tried to save every spare cent for fabric. And I was still sending $50 or $100 back to Columbus whenever my mother called, her voice laced with that familiar tone of expectation. "Family helps family, Clara," she would say, and I would have to bite my tongue to stop myself from screaming. My father remained a ghost, and Sophie's texts were short and impersonal, asking about my grades but never about me. The weight of their demands felt like a wet, heavy blanket suffocating me. School itself wasn't any easier. While my professors praised my unique vision, the competition was savage. My classmates would show off their polished portfolios, their wealthy families funding their trips to fashion weeks in Paris or securing them internships at major design houses. All I had was my grit and my old sewing machine. I spent countless hours in the school's sewing studio, a dim, dusty basement that always smelled of thread and machine oil. I pushed myself harder and harder, skipping meals, ignoring the constant headaches, absolutely determined not to fall behind. I told myself I could handle it all. The classes, the job, the money I was sending home. I felt like I had no other choice. Then came the night my body gave out. I was in the studio putting the finishing touches on a silk dress for a major critique. The clock on the wall read 2 a.m., and I realized I hadn't eaten anything since noon. Suddenly, my vision started to blur, my hands began to tremble, and the entire room seemed to tilt on its axis. I collapsed onto the cold, hard floor, the delicate silk dress slipping from my fingers. It was a classmate who found me and got me to the campus health center. A kind nurse gave me some water and told me I was suffering from severe dehydration, exhaustion, and that my body was dangerously run down. "You can't keep going on like this," she warned me, her voice gentle but firm. I nodded, but inside, a cold fear was spreading through me. What if I couldn't keep up? What if my mother had been right all along? The next day, I called Jenna. I broke down and told her everything. The endless hours, the constant hunger, the overwhelming fear that I was going to fail. "You're so much stronger than this, Clara," she said softly. "You're out there living your dream." I clung to her words, so grateful for her warmth. For a little while, her calls were the only thing that kept me going. I managed to finish the silk dress, I presented it in my critique, and I got an A. It felt like a monumental victory, a small sign that I could still succeed. But then, the whispers started. I was at the workshop one day when I overheard a classmate talking to a customer. "Oh, her? She's the one who ditched her family to go chase some fashion fantasy." My stomach completely dropped. I recognized the phrasing. It was almost exactly what Jenna had said to me on the phone. When I confronted her during our next call, my voice was shaking. "Jenna, did you tell people that I abandoned my family?" She hesitated for a moment, and then she let out this light, airy laugh. "Clara, don't be so dramatic. I was just venting for you." People must have twisted my words. Her tone was so breezy and dismissive, but something about it felt deeply wrong. Still, I tried to let it go. I couldn't bear the thought of losing the one person who had always been in my corner. But the rumors spread like ink in water. Classmates started whispering that I'd run off without a care in the world, leaving my poor family behind. I wanted to scream the truth at them, that I was the one who was struggling, sending money I didn't have, practically starving just to survive in this city. But I stayed silent. Instead, I just threw myself even deeper into my work, picking up extra shifts at the workshop and sketching late into the night. Every new design became a quiet act of rebellion, a thread of defiance against every voice telling me I couldn't make it. Jenna's calls became less and less frequent, and when we did talk, her tone was distant. When I tried to tell her about my new projects, she'd quickly change the subject back to things happening in Columbus, or ask about Sophie. It felt like she was intentionally pushing me away. I stopped calling her. I started designing with a new kind of fury, every stitch a testament that I was building something real, something that went far beyond their doubts and their lies. The classmate who had helped me that night in the studio became an unexpected friend, sharing her notes with me when I had to miss a lecture for work. I realized I wasn't completely alone, and that small realization gave me a renewed sense of strength. I had no idea back then just how far Jenna's words would travel, or how they would come back to haunt me years later. But in those grueling, exhausting days, with my sewing machine humming in the corner of my tiny room, I refused to let go of my dream. I was fighting for myself now, and I had no intention of giving up. Austin felt like a clean slate, with its warm desert air and vibrant creative energy. At 22, I had graduated from design school, my portfolio filled with pieces that told the story of my journey. Grit, defiance, and hope stitched into every single seam. Chicago had nearly broken me, but it had also forged me into someone stronger. I had moved to Austin, drawn by a job offer from a small startup that was focused on sustainable fashion. It wasn't a glamorous, high-profile job, but it was a real start. It was a chance to build something tangible, far away from the chaos of the big city and the heavy weight of my family's expectations. The startup was a small, tight-knit team. We worked out of a sun-drenched studio filled with rolls of recycled and organic fabrics. I completely immersed myself in my work, designing a line of clothing made from upcycled materials. Denim scraps, discarded linen, anything we could give a new life. My first collection, a series of bold, structured jackets and flowing dresses, caught the eye of a popular local boutique. I would spend my days sketching, cutting, and sewing, my old, faithful sewing machine humming along as I transformed forgotten fabrics into something beautiful and new. My colleague, a quiet woman named Maria with a real talent for marketing, was the one who pushed me to submit my work to magazines. "You have something really special, Clara," she said, her voice filled with a steady, unwavering belief. I wasn't used to that kind of validation, but it fueled me. Then came the phone call that changed my entire life. An editor from Verve, a major fashion magazine, wanted to feature my collection in an upcoming article about sustainable design. I remember standing in the middle of the studio, the phone pressed hard against my ear, my heart pounding in my chest as she described the piece. When the magazine was published, my name, Clara Vance, was right there in print, next to stunning photographs of my designs. I held the magazine in my hands, tracing the letters of my name with my fingertip, feeling a surge of pride that was so pure and powerful, it almost brought me to tears. Maria organized a small celebration for me in the studio. We had cheap wine and tacos, and the sound of our laughter echoed late into the night. For the very first time in my life, I felt truly seen, not just as a dreamer, but as a designer who had actually made it. But that success cast a long shadow. I had hoped that Jenna, my old friend from Columbus, would be excited for me. I called her, my voice bubbling with excitement, eager to share my news. "Jenna, Verve magazine, can you believe it?" I said. Her response was clipped and cool. "That's great, Clara," she said, but there was a strange, sharp edge to her voice, as if she were holding something back. I brushed it off, telling myself she was probably just busy. But soon her calls stopped altogether. Her texts became shorter and shorter. I told myself it was just the distance, that this is what happens to friendships over time. I was wrong. The first real sign of trouble came a few months later, at a local fashion event in Austin. I was networking, talking to boutique owners, when another designer pulled me aside. "Is it true," she asked, her brow furrowed with concern, "that you had to borrow a lot of money from your family to get your career started?" I froze, my stomach twisting into a tight knot. "No," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "I built this all myself." She nodded, but I could see the doubt still lingering in her eyes. That same question started popping up again and again, from colleagues, from potential clients, even from a local reporter. The rumor was spreading, and it wasn't hard to figure out its source. I called Jenna, my hands trembling with a mixture of anger and hurt. "Are you telling people I took money from my family?" I asked, my voice quiet but firm. She hesitated for a second, then let out this brittle, nervous laugh. "Clara, I just said that you probably had some help getting started. It's not a big deal." But it was a big deal. Her lie painted me as a fraud, as someone who had cheated her way to success. It was damaging my reputation, making new clients hesitate, making them question my integrity. The pride I had felt from the Verve feature turned sour in my mouth, tainted by her betrayal. "You were my best friend, Jenna," I said, my voice finally cracking. "How could you do this to me?" She didn't have an answer. She just hung up the phone. The loneliness hit me hard after that. Austin was supposed to be my sanctuary, but without Jenna's friendship, I felt completely adrift. I had already severed ties with my family, ignoring my mother's angry voicemails and my sister's hollow, insincere congratulations after the magazine feature. My father, as always, remained completely silent. I had built a life I was genuinely proud of, but it felt like the people I had once trusted were trying to tear it down from 1,000 miles away. Late at night, I would sit in my studio, staring at my sketches, wondering if I would ever be able to outrun their doubts and their lies. Then a lifeline appeared. My old professor from design school reached out after she saw the Verve piece. She happened to be in Austin for a conference and invited me to get coffee. Over steaming mugs, I told her everything. The rumors, the betrayal, the crushing sense of isolation. She listened intently, her eyes kind but also sharp with understanding. "Clara, you've already proven them all wrong," she said firmly. "Don't you dare let their lies define who you are." She introduced me to a respected local designer who became a mentor to me, guiding me through the tricky politics of the industry. My colleague, Maria, also stepped up, helping me draft pitches to new clients and working tirelessly to rebuild my name. Their faith in me was like a quiet, steady anchor, pulling me back from the edge. I poured myself back into my work, designing with a fierceness I hadn't felt before. Each new piece I created felt like a rebuttal to the rumors, a testament to my resilience. I started speaking at local industry events, sharing my real story. Not the twisted version Jenna had told, but the truth of my struggle and my perseverance. And slowly, things started to turn around. Clients came back, drawn to the authenticity and passion in my work. The startup grew, my designs were picked up by more boutiques, and every new sale felt like a hard-won victory. Looking back, Jenna's betrayal had cut me to the core, but it also gave me a painful kind of clarity. I had spent years of my life chasing the approval of people who refused to see me, my family, my friend. I finally realized I didn't need it anymore. My professor's guidance, Maria's loyalty, and my own unwavering determination, that was enough. I was finally, truly, building a life that belonged entirely to me. And yet deep down, I had a feeling that the past wasn't quite finished with me yet. The family I had left behind in Columbus still lingered, like voices waiting in the dark, ready for one last chance to pull me back. 7 years after I'd left, I stepped back into the thick, humid summer heat of Columbus. At 25, I had returned for my parents' 35th wedding anniversary, a grand, ostentatious affair that my mother had orchestrated down to the very last perfect detail. I hadn't wanted to come, but some small, lingering part of me, maybe a need for final closure, had pulled me back. My life in Austin was stable and fulfilling. I had a burgeoning career with the sustainable fashion startup. I'd bought a small house all on my own, and my name was starting to mean something in the industry. I wasn't that invisible girl anymore, and yet walking back into my childhood home still felt like willingly stepping into a trap. The house was overflowing with relatives and old family friends, the air thick with a mixture of expensive perfume and forced chatter. My mother stood at the center of it all, her smile perfectly practiced, her dress immaculate. My father hovered nearby, as quiet and unobtrusive as ever, nodding politely at guests. My sister Sophie was there too, of course, her confident, lawyerly poise earning her admiring glances from everyone. I stayed on the edge of the crowd, holding a glass of wine, feeling like a complete outsider in the very place that was supposed to be my home. I had dressed for the occasion with intention, wearing a tailored jacket from my own collection, a silent but clear statement of the woman I had become. But no one seemed to notice, at least not at first. Dinner was served in the backyard, under strings of twinkling lights that glowed softly in the dusk. My mother raised her glass for a toast, her voice carrying easily over the clinking of silverware. "To 35 years," she said, her eyes briefly meeting my father's, "and to family, to the children who make us proud." She glanced meaningfully at my sister, who beamed back at her. Then her eyes landed on me. "Some children make you proud," she added, her tone cool and deliberate. "Others just exist." The words hit me like a physical slap, carrying the exact same sting of dismissal I had felt my entire life. The table fell silent. All eyes flickered toward me, waiting for my reaction. I gripped my fork, my pulse starting to race, but this time I refused to be silent. "Enough, Mom," I said, my voice miraculously steady despite the fire raging in my chest. "You don't get to dismiss me anymore." She froze, her wine glass hovering halfway to her lips. Guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats, but I didn't care. "I've built a life for myself that you can't just ignore," I went on, standing up now. "I own a home in Austin that I bought with my own money. My designs have been featured in Verve magazine. I didn't just exist. I became someone, and I did it with no thanks to you." My mother's smile finally faltered, her eyes narrowing with fury, but I held her gaze. "You never once believed in me," I said quietly, "and I don't need you to anymore." The silence that followed was suffocating, broken only by an awkward cough from a distant cousin. My father was staring intently down at his plate, his hands perfectly still. My sister shifted in her seat, her expression unreadable. My mother finally set her glass down, her voice low and cutting. "You've always been so dramatic, Clara," she hissed. "Running off to chase your little hobby doesn't make you special." Her words were designed to wound me, but they couldn't touch me. I'd heard them too many times before. "It's not a hobby," I replied, my voice calm and clear. "It's my career, and I'm damn good at it." I then turned to my sister, the one person I had once hoped might stand up for me. "Sophie," I said sharply, "you knew about the rumors Jenna was spreading, didn't you? The ones that said I borrowed money from Mom and Dad to get where I am." Her eyes widened slightly, caught completely off guard. A new wave of murmurs rippled through the guests at the table. "You knew," I pressed on, "and you didn't say a single word." Sophie hesitated, her perfect composure finally starting to crack. "I heard something," she admitted quietly, "but I didn't think it was my place to get involved." I let out a bitter, humorless laugh. "Not your place? You're my sister. You let her lie about me. You let people think I was a fraud, and you did nothing." The air felt electric. Every single person at that table was staring at us. Sophie looked down, twisting her napkin in her fingers. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said, but the words were hollow and meaningless. My mother cut in, her tone sharp as a knife. "This is a celebration, Clara. Stop making a scene." But I was done playing their game. "You don't get to control this," I said, turning back to her. "You don't get to rewrite my story just to fit your perfect narrative. I am not your failure." I set my wine glass down on the table, the clink loud in the heavy silence, and walked back toward the house. Inside, I grabbed my bag, my hands shaking but my resolve firm. A few relatives tried to stop me with empty pleasantries, but I just brushed past them. My father caught my arm just as I reached the front door, his eyes meeting mine for the first time all night. "Clara," he said softly, but he stopped there, the rest of the words dying on his lips. I pulled my arm away. "It's too late, Dad," I said, and stepped out into the night. The drive back to my hotel was a blur, the streets of Columbus feeling both familiar and foreign. A hot anger burned under my skin, at my mother's casual cruelty, my sister's silent betrayal, and my father's complete and utter absence. And yet, underneath all of that, there was something else, something steadier. Confidence. I had finally faced them. I had finally said all the things I had kept buried for so many years. I wasn't the scared little girl who had left with a suitcase and a sewing machine anymore. I was a woman who had built her own life and earned her own place in the world. Leaving that party wasn't running away. It was choosing myself. Back in the quiet of my hotel room, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my reflection in the dark window. Columbus had tried to make me feel small again, but it had failed. I thought about Austin, my studio, my designs, and the people in my life who actually believed in me. My mother's words, my sister's betrayal, even Jenna's lies. None of it could touch that. I had proven them all wrong, not with my words, but with every single choice I had made. As I packed my bag for my flight back to Austin, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I was ready for whatever came next. A few months later, my phone buzzed with a call from my mother. I was in my studio in Austin, surrounded by my sketches and fabric swatches, the familiar hum of my sewing machine, a steady and comforting presence. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the screen. After the disaster at the anniversary party, I had hoped for nothing but silence from my family, but seeing Eleanor's name flash on the caller ID sent a cold chill down my spine. I answered, bracing myself for the attack. "Clara." My mother's voice was sharp, completely stripped of any warmth. "I saw your little feature in Verve. You seem to be doing very well for yourself." Her tone wasn't congratulatory, it was calculating. "You owe us," she continued, getting straight to the point. "We raised you, and now you're flaunting your success while we get nothing in return. You will start sending money home again, or I will go online and tell everyone that you scammed your way to the top." My stomach twisted into a tight knot. The threat was unmistakable, a blade aimed directly at the reputation I had fought so hard to build. I took a slow, deliberate breath, steadying my voice. "I'm done, Mom," I said quietly but firmly. "I don't owe you anything. I built this life all by myself." She let out a cold, cutting laugh. "You think you're so untouchable now?" she sneered. "I'll make sure everyone knows you're a fraud." Before I could even respond, the line went dead. My hands were trembling as I set the phone down, her venomous words echoing in my head. I had faced her cruelty my entire life, but this was different. This was deliberate and vengeful. The next day, my sister called. Sophie's voice was calm and cold, her tone sounding like she was delivering a closing argument in court. "You need to listen to Mom," she said. "If you don't start helping out, we will post online that you lied about your success, that you used family money to get started." I clenched my jaw, a slow, hot anger burning in my chest. "You don't get to threaten me, Sophie," I replied, my voice even. "You stood by and did nothing while Jenna spread her lies, and now you're doing the exact same thing. I'm not afraid of you." She paused for a moment. "You're making a huge mistake," she said finally. I hung up the phone. My heart was pounding, but my resolve was unshaken. My father never called. His silence, as always, spoke louder than any words could. I just sat in my studio staring at my phone, the weight of their threats pressing down on me. They really thought they could still control me, that they could drag me back into their toxic world of guilt and manipulation. But I wasn't the scared girl who had run away to Chicago with a suitcase and a dream anymore. I had a career, a home, and a name that I had earned, and I was not about to let them tarnish it. That night, I went on a popular online forum for fashion designers, a place where people often shared their stories and asked for advice. My hands shook slightly as I began to type, but my voice, in my writing, was clear. I told my entire truth. I wrote about how I had left home at 18, how I had worked myself to the bone in Chicago, and how I had built everything I had without a single cent of help from my family. I wrote about my mother's constant demands for money, my sister's silence, and now, their threats of blackmail. "I am not a fraud," I finished the post. "I am a designer who fought for every single step of this journey." Then, my heart hammering against my ribs, I hit post. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Other designers, clients, and even complete strangers started sharing their own stories of dealing with toxic families and emotional manipulation. Some offered words of encouragement, while others gave me practical advice on how to protect my reputation. A local boutique owner who carried my designs invited me to speak on a panel about authenticity in the industry. My colleague, Maria, read my post and came into my office, placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "You did the right thing," she said softly. For the first time, I felt like I was surrounded by a community of people who believe my truth without question. But the fallout from my post came quickly. My mother left a series of venomous voicemails. "You have humiliated this family," she hissed in one of them. "You will regret this for the rest of your life." Sophie sent a single furious text message, angry that I had aired our family's dirty laundry in public. I didn't reply to any of them. Instead, I opened my contacts and blocked their numbers, one by one. My hands didn't even shake this time. I hesitated for a moment when I got to my father's contact, but he had never once stood up for me, never once spoken a word in my defense. I blocked him, too. Jenna's number had been deleted long ago. I was finally done with all of them. In the days that followed, a sense of calm settled over me. My studio became my refuge once again, a place of creation, not a place of fear. I started designing new pieces that were bolder and freer than anything I had done before, each stitch feeling like a declaration of my independence. Their threats had rattled me, but in the end, they had only served to remind me of everything I had already overcome. My family did not define me. Their words, their greed, their lies, they were all just chains that I had already broken. Now, I was truly free. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I was ready to face it, entirely on my own terms. My life in Austin, my work, my truth, they were all mine. And this time, no one was ever going to take them away. Back in Austin, my small house glowed with candlelight. At 30, I stood in the middle of a life I had built from nothing, with a thriving design career, a cozy home filled with my art, and a sense of peace I had never known was possible. I had invited the people who truly mattered to my 30th birthday party, my old professor, who had guided me through my darkest moments of self-doubt, my colleague Maria, who had believed in my work from day one, a single mother from next door who somehow balanced 2 jobs and a toddler with fierce, unwavering grace, and an artist who lived down the street, whose own family had once rejected his dreams. These were my people now. We weren't bound by blood, but by a shared history of struggle and a quiet, resilient strength. My biological family was not invited. They hadn't earned a place at this table. The living room was buzzing with warm laughter, the dining table covered with a chaotic spread of homemade dishes and half-empty bottles of wine. Maria raised her glass, her eyes shining. "To Clara," she said, "for showing all of us what's possible." I smiled, my heart full, as everyone clinked their glasses together. The single mother told funny stories about her daughter's first steps, her voice bright with joy despite her obvious exhaustion. The artist sketched a quick, charming portrait of me on a napkin, grinning as he handed it to me. "You're one of us," he said, and I felt it deep in my bones, a sense of belonging that I had never once felt in that big house in Columbus. This was my family, chosen and true. As the night began to wind down, my old professor pulled me aside. "I heard something from a mutual acquaintance back in Ohio," she said carefully. "Apparently, your mother's reputation in Columbus has taken a serious hit. After your post went viral in some local circles, people are talking about how she treated you." I just nodded, not surprised. I had told my truth, and the world had listened. "They say people avoid her at community events now," my professor added, "and your sister lost a few major clients. It seems her law firm's name got tangled up in the whole scandal." I didn't feel any joy at hearing this, but I didn't feel any guilt either. Eleanor and Sophie had made their choices, and these were simply the consequences. I thought back to the years of constant demands, my mother's hateful voicemails, my sister's cold threats, my father's deafening silence. I had blocked their numbers long ago and had carefully built a wall around my heart to protect myself. Hearing about their current struggles felt distant, like listening to a news report about a country I had left behind years ago. I didn't need their approval or even their presence to feel whole anymore. My home, filled with warmth and genuine laughter, was all the proof I needed. I had created a world for myself where I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. The party ended with warm hugs and sincere promises to get together again soon. I stood by my front door watching my friends disappear into the warm Austin night, their voices fading under the vast, starry sky. I cleaned up slowly, stacking plates and folding napkins, letting the peaceful quiet settle around me. Maria had left a note on the table. It just said, "You've built something beautiful." I smiled and tucked the note into my pocket. She was right. This life, my work, my home, my chosen family, it was all mine, earned with every late night, every skipped meal, and every hard-won victory. Looking back, I finally realized just how far I had come. I had left Columbus with nothing but a sewing machine and a desperate dream. I had fought my way through exhaustion and betrayal, and I had built a name for myself in a world that had tried its best to dismiss me. My mother's insults, my sister's lies, Jenna's rumors, they had all tried to hold me back, but in the end, they had all failed. I had found my strength in the people who truly saw me, the ones who shared my fight. The single mother, the artist, my professor, my colleague. They weren't just guests at my party. They were my foundation. And so, to anyone out there who might be listening to this, I want to say this. You do not need their approval to build your own world. Not your family's, not your friends, not the voices in your head that tell you that you're not enough. Choose the people who lift you up, the ones who gladly share your table. Find your people, the ones who see your worth and hold on to them tightly. Create a life that is unapologetically yours, stitch by stitch, and don't ever let anyone tear it apart. Your value isn't found in their eyes. It's found in the world you build for yourself, the one you choose to call home.